So what is going on, everybody? Fernando Silva here with another video, and in today's video we're going to be talking about iPadOS 15.4 Beta 3 and doing a little follow-up video to see how it's been doing from a performance standpoint, see if any of those bugs have been squashed, and see how I've been dealing with it from a battery perspective as well. So without further ado, let's check out iPadOS 15.4 Beta 3, but let me know in the comments below, did you guys update to it? Are you guys in the beta program? Are you in the public developer program, in the regular developer program? Let me know in the comments below, and if you guys have tried Universal Control as well, let me know, because I'm curious to know what your experience with Universal Control is overall, because for the most part it's been great, but there's been a couple of bugs which I'm sure will be fixed with time. But without further ado, let's check out iPadOS 15.4 Beta 3. That's a mouthful, but let's get it. So let's get right into this video, everybody. So we did find some new features on iPadOS 15.4 Beta 3, but I did want to show you guys to make sure that we are on the right software. So let's go into the About section, go into the software version. We're on 19E5225G. So we are on that Beta 3 iteration of 15.4. But some of the new features that we saw were actually inside of the podcast app. So if we go into Photos, I actually took a screenshot of what this looks like. So we go into Recents. This is the new splash screen that we get with what's new in Apple Podcasts. So we now have the ability to filter episodes, which is something that hasn't been on the Apple Podcast app, which is going to make it a lot easier to navigate. And then we also have the ability to browse by season. So I'm going to show you guys what this is like. So if we go into the podcast app, and if you want to go into, let's say, the Tim Ferriss Show. So if you want to go into the Tim Ferriss Show, you can now have the ability to, if I click on its actual page, you can actually filter based on episodes, based on unplayed, based on downloaded. And then if there are seasons of the podcast, you can also filter based on seasons, and you no longer have to scroll all the way down to figure out exactly where you are. So that's a nice little UI change and something that's actually tangible and useful inside the podcast app, which I'm glad is coming with 15.4 for the public release, because Spotify's had that for a while, and I'm a big podcast guy, so being able to navigate on here is going to be great in my transition over to Apple Podcasts if I ever want to do that. So kudos to Apple for upgrading the podcast application. And then also, if you go into the settings and if you go into your podcast app settings, so if you scroll down, go to podcast, we got some new external controls. So if you scroll all the way down, we did get this new skip button feature and the ability to customize basically how far you actually want to fast forward things when you are fast forwarding inside of the podcast app. Kind of like YouTube, when you double tap, it skips 10 seconds. You can customize how far forward or how far backward it does go. You can actually decide how far forward and how far backward these actually do go. But then we also got some new external controls. So you have now, inside here it says headphone and car controls can be used to play the next/previous episode or skip forward and back within the episode. So if you're in a car and you have your iPad or iPhone plugged in and you're listening to a podcast, normally if you press next, it's going to skip to the next episode because it thinks it's a song. But now you have the ability to make it so it's actually changing you skipping inside of the podcast episode instead of actually skipping to another episode of the podcast, which I think is actually great. Makes it a lot easier to navigate, a lot easier to use, especially when you're not using it on your actual device and you're using it with a Bluetooth device or with headphones or with a controller or whatever the case may be. So again, the new verbiage says headphone and car controls can be used to play the next/previous episode or skip forward/back within that episode. If an episode contains chapters, next and previous will navigate those chapters and then the episodes. So again, just a nice little UI change and a nice little function change, which is great to see. So some other things that we noticed inside of the settings is actually with notification summary. So if we go into the settings, go into notifications, and then go into your scheduled summary, we now have some new verbiage and some new data that shows exactly what's going on from a notification standpoint inside of your notification summary. So before, we actually used to get the daily notification average, but now it's just giving us the entire weekly average, which I personally think is a little bit better of an indicator of how many notifications are coming in. So having that there at a glance inside of your notification summary is actually a great thing to see. So you can see that for the most part, Gmail really takes over my notifications, and you have Taskade, Public, my wallet. So notifications, for the most part, I leave them turned off unless they're absolutely necessary. So that's what we got going on inside of the new notification summary or inside of the new schedule summary. And then one more thing that we did see inside of our settings, so if we go into settings and go into Apple TV. So if we go into the TV, we now have the ability to change the up next display of your viewing ship, right? So if you go into this section right here, you have the ability to do a still frame or post art. So right now I have it in still frame, and to show you guys what that looks like is if we go into the TV app, you can actually see if I'm watching a show, if I'm in the middle of watching a show, we should be getting a still frame of the show. So for instance, which one is one that I'm actually using? So here you can see that we actually get still frames of all the stuff that's been watched. But if I go back into the settings and change it to poster art, we should now be getting the poster art of that show instead of the still frame. So yep, there you go. You do get the poster art instead of the still frame, which is great to see. A nice little customization feature, which I don't know if it has any function, but if you do prefer seeing where exactly you are in the show, then that's now new inside of Apple TV. And those are all the new things that were added inside of 15.4 Beta 3 and that we were able to find as the days went on. So Beta 4 should be coming out soon, but from a performance standpoint, this thing has been just whizzing by. I've had zero issues. The app library has been working. It's very, very intuitive. 120 hertz is still rocking, which I love to see. Multitasking still works great. All of my control center stuff is happening, or my notification center, my control center is still there. We now have that new feature for the Magic Keyboard brightness right here. Obviously, I'm not connected to it, so it's not going to be turned on. But when I do plug it in, you do have that ability, so that's also new with 15.4. So overall, 15.4 has been a great update. But lastly, let's go into the battery and see how we've been doing with battery life. So we go to battery section. Let's check the last 10 days here. We're averaging about an hour and 21 minutes of screen on time and 32 minutes of screen off time. But if you go on a day like Wednesday, right, so we got about almost 5 hours of screen on time with about 100% battery. So you can see that on a day like this day, so I think this was Saturday, we actually left it plugged in like the entire day and it was running stuff in the background. But on a day like this one, 5 hours of screen on time, almost 2 hours of screen off time. I think this is a great day. Again, LumaFusion took about an hour and a half. Bruce Free took about an hour and a half, which is like an audio plugin app that I use inside of LumaFusion. Microsoft Office, all that good stuff is there. So 5 hours of battery life, I'll take. I do want that 8 to 10 hours of battery life, but let's see if we ever get there. But overall, I've been loving this update. It's been very stable, and I do recommend it if you guys do want to jump on it. But let's get out of this view and go to the normal one. So that's pretty much going to do for this video, everybody. Like you saw, there were a couple of new features that we did notice as the days went on with this follow-up video on iPadOS 15.4 Beta 3, but none of them were game-changing features. There were mostly aesthetic differences and things that you could notice, but they weren't going to make your day-to-day life that much easier, right? So we had some new splash screens with a podcast app. The new podcast updates in terms of being able to filter your episodes and filter based on season, based on time, and based on if you viewed them or not is actually a welcome addition, which Spotify's had for a while. But now it's come over to Apple Podcasts, which I love to see. So I'm a big podcast listener, and that's a big reason why my Spotify, like how many minutes I've listened to of Spotify has gone down, because I'm just constantly listening to podcasts on YouTube. So who knows? Maybe we'll jump into the Apple Podcast app. But like you guys saw, there weren't too many tangible differences. We're probably going to get the Beta 4 update at some point this week for all iOS and iPadOS devices. And if you guys are using Universal Control, make sure that you're staying up to date with the macOS beta updates as well, because if you update just once with the macOS beta into Beta 1 and you're on Beta 3 with iPadOS, Universal Control isn't going to work anymore. So make sure that you are using the same exact betas on both macOS and iPadOS to make sure that Universal Control stays in tip-top shape. But that's going to do it for this video. Hopefully you guys enjoyed. Leave a comment down below if you guys did actually update to this 15.4 Beta 3 update, because I'm very curious to know how many people are in the beta program. But if you guys did make it to the end, leave a little dolphin right here. And that's going to do it for this video. I'm out of here. Leave some comments down below if there's any software you guys want me to review on the iPad Pro, because I'm always curious.